Hello, my name is Alfred Valentini, Alfredo to my family, and Fred to a lot of my friends. I am the proud descendant of Italian immigrants, though I often tell people that I am an insalata mista of Italian heritage. My maternal grandmother, Anne Ferriero, was Neapolitan, and my maternal grandfather, Anthony Ferriero, was from the provincia di Salerno. Anthony came to the United States in the early 20th century to work on the railroad, first in Utica and then in Albany. It was there that he met Anna, a member of the Dean family, a name that certainly had been changed when its bearers arrived on these shores. Two of Anna's brothers were involved in law enforcement. One, Tony, rose to deputy chief of the Albany police force. The Ferrieros settled in Ravenna, a town south of Albany, and raised 10 children together there. My paternal grandparents immigrated separately from two neighboring towns in the Marche region of Italy, Castelvecchio and Monteporzio. Nonno Mario Valentini left Italy early in the 20th century, when just a teen. He joined his brother who had already left for America. He would settle in the city of Cohoes, just north of Albany. He left most of his family behind and never returned to Castelvecchio. Nonna Annunziata Testaguzza left Monteporzio with her nuclear family, sometime after my grandfather. Mario found work in a foundry, the Rensselaer Valve Company. Annunziata worked in one of the knitting mills of Cohoes. They would raise 8 children there. During World War II, 4 of the Valentini boys would serve in the armed forces. My dad, Alfred Vincent Valentini, trained as a Navy air mechanic and carried the skills that he had learned through a successful career in industry. My uncle Angelo, on the Ferraro side, was briefly reported missing in action in the intense fighting around Naples. Later found, his unit moved north and while in Milano, fell in love with a girl from there, Alice, who would become his wife and eventually become my godmother. The story goes that my father met my mother through her brother. As recent veterans, the men had become acquainted and were thinking of settling down and raising families. The combination of my mother coming from a loud, gregarious, and sometimes argumentative Neapolitan family, hooking up with my father, who came from a more sedate environment, where their brand of humor was more ironic than in your face, always fascinated me. Margaret, my mother, was a dreamer and always ready to challenge what she disagreed with. As a young girl, she took clarinet lessons from a family friend. In one of her flights of fantasy, she jumped on a table, blowing her instrument to imitate Benny Goodman. Her teacher may have intended to get her down, but when he grabbed her by her leg, she interpreted it as something else and soundly whacked him on the head with her clarinet, thus ending her musical aspirations. She was 17 when she met Dad in 1947 and married him the following year. Alfred V. Valentini, my father, was always mechanically inclined. As a boy, he worked on his brother's milk truck. One day, he found an old clock to which my uncle had administered last rites. Between deliveries in the back of the truck, he tinkered with the clock until he got it working. After the war, he first found work with National Auto, and later began a long career with Bear Manning, later to become Norton Company. Starting out as a laborer on the cloth finishing line of the coated abrasives production of sandpaper, he would work his way up to foreman and eventually director of that whole sector of the operations at the Watervliet, New York plant. When Norton expanded internationally, Dad was sent to France, Russia, India, Brazil, and South Africa to set up production and train personnel. I was always proud that he had helped hundreds of people all over the world learn how to make a living. I was born in 1950, 2 years after my parents' marriage. I grew up geographically closer to my paternal family, but visited my maternal family often. Sundays began with my sister and I being dressed like miniature adults, me in fedora, tie, and jacket, my sister in crinolines, white gloves, bonnet, purse, and patent leather shoes. We would first be exhibited at church, and then make a trip to the Ferrieros for lunch, with hopefully my grandmother's fried meatballs and chiacchiere napoletane, sweet fried ribbons of dough covered with powdered sugar or honey. My sister and I would fight for the ears of the still hot bread from the bakery a couple blocks away. Getting our fill of food and family pettegolezze, we would then travel to the Valentini compound. Nonna would always make a big fuss over our arrival and produce quarters that she kept in her china cupboard, then secretly pressed them into my sister's and my hands. Nonna Annunziata's kitchen always smelled of exotic dishes that she and Nonung, our name for Nonno, would put together from scratch. It was not uncommon to see homemade tortellini, cappelletti, grilled rabbit, frog's legs, or snails. One of our favorite stories is of the October 31st that my Valentini grandparents had just settled down for dinner. There was a knock at the door, and when Nonna opened, she found a group of adorable children in costumes who shouted, "Trick or treat!" "Misericordia, mi sono dimenticata!" exclaimed Nonna to Nunung. And not having the requisite candy on hand, Nunung gave her a fistful of snails for the children. When Nonna offered them to the kids, they took one look, screamed, and ran away from the house. Growing up, I only learned words or phrases in Italian. My generation was not encouraged to speak our heritage language. When Dad started his travels in France, he made his way back to Castelvecchio in Monteporzio, the first American member of the family to do so in 50 years. This inspired me to study a language. Italian was not available in my school, so it was the 60s, and Jackie Kennedy had just charmed de Gaulle, and Dad had been to France. I began with French. In college at Albany University, I was able to finally study Italian. In my senior year, I studied through Albany's programs in Perugia and Rome. I went on borrowed money. While classmates were taking weekend trips to other European capitals, I tread the streets of Rome and Umbria, taking in every monument, church, and museum that I could get into free. I often dragged along Italian friends who, though being natives, never visited some of those places. They used to say they learned more through those excursions by seeing things through my eyes that for them, on their own, passed as ordinary. My greatest achievement upon returning back to the States was that I could finally carry on a conversation with my grandmother. I was blessed, because she passed away not long after. I did my graduate work in education and became a certified teacher of Italian. I began my career as a substitute teacher in schools near Albany while working part-time in retail and construction. My first full-time position was as a full-year substitute in Utica, New York, which had a heavily settled Italian-American community. It is there that I met my wife, Maria Spataro, who had immigrated to the United States with her family from Ardore Marina, provincia di Reggio Calabria, in 1958. When I ended my year-long position, I found work in Port Washington, New York, but was unfortunately laid off at the end of the academic year as a teacher. Pleased with my work, but unable to offer me a job teaching Italian, the district offered me other work. But my heart said I was a teacher of Italian, and I held out until I was offered a permanent position back in Utica, where I remained for 31 more years. Utica turned out to be a good fit for me. It put me closer to my sweetheart. We married in 1977 and had a daughter, Ariana. Utica placed me near ski slopes that I enjoyed in the winter. I became involved with community theater, a dance company, choirs, and a chapter of the Sons of Italy, of which I would eventually become president for 2 years. I reveled in doing for my students what I had done for my Italian friends in Rome. I took groups to Italy when they could afford it, to New York City's Metropolitan Museum, Little Italy and Ellis Island, the opera, to Italian concerts, and theater. And when none of my colleagues in the other languages wanted to do community displays, I exhibited my students' work and invited local artists to perform with us at the local mall. As a member of several professional organizations, I was able to contribute my modest skills within and outside of my local area. I was regional representative to the New York State Association of Foreign Language Teachers, president of our regional chapter of the American Association of Italian Teachers, a consultant to the New York State Education Department, served on committees for the creation of national standards of the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Language, involved with a study of arts and education program with Harvard University, and a contributor to the recommendations for national standards for foreign language teachers' licensure. My most rewarding endeavor, however, was to collaborate with two colleagues, Fernando Malozzi and Anna Maria Monetti of Syracuse University, on creating a 2-volume text series with ancillaries for the teaching of Italian language and culture. I was able to extend my career adding adjunct professor to my resume at 2 colleges, and in the year 2000, I became the director of Italian American Committee on Education's summer program in Italy, a position I held until 2016. Once again, I was able to teach and explore, opening up new eyes to the wonders of the Italian language and culture. After 46 years in the classroom, I have now retired from teaching. At the moment, I am team leader for the creation of standardized exams in Italian for checkpoints A and B with the Oneida Herkimer Madison Board of Cooperative Education Services. My wife and I continue to speak Italian in our home and travel, when possible, to Italy. So I guess you could say that this whole program was kind of a trip or a voyage of a typical Italian-American family, from the immigrant grandparents to my first-generation parents to myself, then on to my daughter and students. It's a big circle. We started out in Italy, and now we keep returning over and over.
Se vedrò le luci di New York, da lontano ogni volta sentirò che sarà di nuovo casa mia. Un cuore che batte forte, vola via.